Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode of an Evolved Review. I am your host, James Caleb Kitchens. I am joined each and every week by none other than straight from the Stovall Wrestling Network, Caleb Stovall. How's it going, Caleb?
Hey, what's going on, man?
We are right after we are in that little strange time between Christmas and New Year's as we record this. Where like everything is kind of open, but everything just isn't really doing anything. It's a very strange time always.
Yeah,
Um, it's the holidays, I guess. Everybody's getting ready to kick off 2021. Let's hope that it is a shit ton better than 2020.
yes, absolutely. But hey, by the time everyone is hearing this, it is a brand new year. There's a lot to look forward to and everything like that. It's a brand new start. I don't want to talk about politics or virus or any bullshit like that, but at least we have a little bit of a handle on it now. There's everybody knows more of what to do. So hopefully things will start, really opening back up and we can start having, even bigger crowds in places. And also, I'm looking forward to music venues,
Yeah.
opening back up, man, because that was my scene, during high school and everything like that.
My thing at this point in time is I am dying to have a fucking wrestling event.
Yes.
Um, there are unanswered things that I need to give people answers to, and it's probably by the time we get to run at Viral, it's going to be over a year probably from the last time we got to run. So it's kind of unheard of, for a wrestling company to be forced to take that kind of hiatus. Um, but it's going to be bigger and better than ever when it comes back. I'm really excited for it. I'll tell you what I'm not excited for is today's episode. Which if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, then you already know because you can see it right there on the screen. And then if you're if by some chance you're listening to this and you just clicked on our faces and didn't read the title, it's time to turn back because this is the episode we spent half of 2020 avoiding.
Yes.
This is going to be the season finale of Dark Side of the Ring, season 2. This is going to be the tragic Owen Hart incident at Over the Edge '99.
Yeah, before we get started, it's so funny because and not funny haha, but like funny coincidence or whatnot. But I remember this. There's a lot of things I have forgotten about in wrestling. Like I'll watch something back from the '90s and stuff like that, like old WCW, old WWF Attitude, and I'll be like, oh man, I don't even remember that. Like that looked new to me. But and I don't remember, what I felt like as a child when that happened. But I remember this when it happened, when I was a child and everything like that. And it's funny because I couldn't comprehend it like I can now.
Right.
Then.
I remember hearing that it happened because it was news globally. And,
Yeah.
by the way, as always, when we review episodes of Dark Side of the Ring, it's been a minute since we've done that. So, you can check it out. You can check it out on Vice. There's tons of places you can get it. You can get it on Google Play. I think it's on the
Hulu.
Apple Store. It's on Hulu. There's tons of places you can find this. But if you haven't seen it yet, to get the most out of this episode, go watch Dark Side of the Ring, the finale of season 2. This is the most recent episode as of this point. And then come back and check out this podcast. Otherwise, you're probably not really going to know what we're talking about for most of it.
Yeah.
But this was a big deal. This was something that transcended wrestling. And as we've talked about a lot, the media, as much as the media in general loves to sort of demonize pro wrestling, and when pro wrestling is doing something really good, they tend to turn a blind eye to it, right? And then when something absolutely tragic happens that exposes like the dark underbelly of pro wrestling, all the cameras are on pro wrestling at that point.
Yeah, I think that was proof when the David Schultz incident, happened and everything like that. You had a reporter, for whatever reason, he just wanted to bring down pro wrestling. And it's like, dude, why? The fact that, if I've always said this, the fact that it was staged, and it was staged, forever, but people actually thought it was real. I was like, that shouldn't be hated. That should be applauded. That's like a magic trick gone right for, 20 years, kind of thing. Like, it
Right.
shouldn't be hated. It should be like, hey, how do they do that? How do they convince them or something like that? But, it's always, well, because it's fake and they say that it's real, we just have to, take chips at it. And then, like you said, anytime something tragic, something I guess wrong happens, they attack it from every angle possible. We saw that with the Benoit incident, like they it was I don't think even the narrative was like, hey, this man just might have went crazy in his own mind and stuff like that. It was, no, Vince McMahon's responsible, and the W and wrestling is responsible, and all this other stuff. I'm like, no one told Benoit to go out there and bump as hard as he did every night.
Yeah, I mean, are there things that, not to get too much into that, but are there things WWE could have done in that incident that could have prevented,
It's true.
that they could have, right? But in the situation we're dealing with tonight, it's a very different story. They absolutely could have done pretty much anything other than what they did.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
And I know we're gonna get into that, and
yeah,
I wasn't gonna focus on that, but I was just saying, like I agree with you. The media just tries to take, every advantage that they can. And look, stuff happens, but stuff happens on a movie set, and stuff happens, in other stuff. But I don't see y'all making a big deal about that.
right,
'Cause I think it's just, stuff happens. And now this one is a bit of a different, story and everything like that. But
right.
just but the point about the media thing, that was more what I was bringing up. I'm not saying WWE is not responsible in this incident, but
Right, yeah, but I mean, Henry Cavill like broke his leg on the set of The Witcher season 2, and you don't see cameras swarming his house 24/7 about it, you know?
exactly,
There's not people trying to bring that production company down,
exactly,
over it. So,
exactly.
as a lot of people know, and if you got into wrestling, if you're a younger person than we are and you got into wrestling at an older age, you may not be really familiar with Owen Hart. But everybody who's familiar with wrestling knows about the Hart family dynasty because, as Jim Cornette talks about in this episode, at one point it was like 40 people. It was like when the NWO was at its largest and like 3 limos pulled up to the arena for the NWO to get out. The Hart family was like 40 people because everyone in the Hart family made a living from wrestling in some way, shape, or form, whether they wrote about wrestling, whether they were wrestlers on the indies, whether they were married to a wrestler. Uh, the territories, I guess we won't say the indies just yet. It would have been the territories at that time, or all the way up to Bret Hart, who was an international star all over the world. I mean, there, during the I'd say the late 80s, early 90s, there was nowhere that Bret Hart could go on Earth and probably not be recognized because
Yeah.
he was just that famous. He was like a Ric Flair or a Sting or even a close to Hulk Hogan kind of level of fame. Um, so you had him, and then you also have Stu Hart with the legendary Dungeon, where, as we all know, tons of some of the greatest wrestlers of all time were trained in the Dungeon.
Oh yeah, and I remember hearing stories about the dungeon, but the first time I was really introduced to the dungeon was I want to say Wrestling with Shadows. Like when
Yeah,
they actually showed Stu taking the football player who said that he wanted to try wrestling, and he was like, "Yeah, let me get you right here. See that right there?"
yeah.
The most imitated. I can't do it as well as like Bruce Pritchard and even JR. JR is amazing with impersonations, but Yeah, I remember hearing about that. So they're from that old school cloth of wrestling.
Right,
You know, they have it instilled in their blood. It's why Brett, to this day, I don't think he was the best charisma wise or character wise or anything like that, but his in ring skills, man, just if you look at everything Bret Hart did, everything had a meaning to it.
right,
Like everything that he did was to set up something in the matchup and stuff like that. And he always looked like he was trying to win a match,
right.
uh, and stuff like that. So
And that's
just
what I always loved about Brett personally myself, was
yes,
that when I was a child, I hated him, and I realized it was because I typically liked the person he was, dismantling out there,
yeah,
and Bret Hart was there to win a wrestling match,
yep,
you know, and that was the thing about it is, he's there to win a wrestling match, and so you've got to take that into consideration. And as a child, watching pro wrestling, you don't do that. You just want your guy to win.
yeah.
Um,
And can I tell you something real quick? My dad, when I was like really getting into wrestling, like I was starting to ask more questions about it, I guess, was he always told me this. This was his opinion now. But when he was watching wrestling, he was like, yeah, so Sting is the best wrestler in WCW and Bret Hart is the best wrestler in WWE. I went, okay, it's easy to follow.
yeah.
So that's why I became such a Sting fan. And I was a Bret Hart fan, but not as much as I was a Sting fan.
Yeah, Bret Hart didn't really grow on me until I was much older.
Yeah.
Honestly, Bret didn't really grow on me until we reviewed or until we watched the episode for the Montreal Screwjob for Dark Side of the Ring.
Really?
Because, yeah, well, because I had always seen that through WWE's lens. I was ignorant of the other side of it. And so, yeah, I mean, if you've only ever seen it through that lens, then Bret Hart is just a whiny piece of shit that, doesn't know the rules of pro wrestling behind the scenes and, was a child. And he basically
Yeah.
took his ball and went home. And that's not what happened. And so, ever since that, I've kind of started to see him in a different light. I've gone back and looked at some of his work. And speaking of changing, your opinion of WWE or their side of the story on something, this episode is the reason that I go out of my way to make sure that they do not get any of my money ever again. And I don't think I'll ever change that idea
Well,
because this incident that we're covering tonight
yeah,
was completely avoidable tragedy.
right. Well, here's my question to you before we get into it really heavy. Um, and then am I a terrible person to still say though that like I get that, but I still need my WWE network, man.
Oh,
Like,
I get it. I get it. I'm not saying anybody else has to do it. I'm just saying
right.
that me personally, I just can't.
Yeah,
Um, I don't like their product anymore anyway. So
well, I don't like the current one, but I can't help but always go back and watch. And I've started to watch a lot of NWA recently.
yeah, and it sucks that they have the monopoly on the all those video libraries that we really love. Um,
I agree.
you know, one thing that I think that's important to talk about with Owen is, despite being part of this legendary wrestling family, um, he was not intending to be a lifer. He did not want to be Ric Flair, retiring at like 70 or whatever it was. He wanted to save his money to the point that he could retire early, and he wanted to take care of his family. He
Yeah.
didn't want to be a pro wrestler for the rest of his life.
Yeah. Which always begs the question to me, kind of throughout the documentary as I was watching it, they were saying he never really got like the top guy push or anything. Like he might have gotten it, a little bit a few times, but he never really did anything. And I'm sitting there just like, maybe he didn't want to be.
Maybe. Well, it's either that or he didn't want as they cover in the episode, he didn't want to engage in all of the Attitude Era shit that they were trying to get him to do. He didn't
Yeah,
want to be portrayed as a adulterer on television. You know, he didn't want to go out and sleep with somebody's wife or, you know, uh, whatever, kidnap somebody's children or, any of this other bullshit that they were doing during the Attitude Era. He was a pro wrestler. He wanted to
yeah,
go out and wrestle and attempt to win a match. And not to say that he didn't have a charisma, because I think he had a lot of charisma, but they were trying to fit the square peg into the round hole,
right.
and it wasn't going to work. Even if he had gone along with it, it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
They cut his hair, they gave him a little goatee. They tried to make him look more rugged, and it just didn't. It didn't work. And one of the things about it too is after he died, the very next year in 2000, they bring in all these workhorses because there weren't very many in the WWE or
Right.
WWF at the time. It was really just him, and then you had a couple of people at the top that really could go.
Yeah.
But I mean, he wasn't getting matches with Undertaker and like Austin and people like that. And then the whole rest of the mid card was like, nothing against them, but it was Val Venus and The Godfather and X Pac and you know all that shit. And don't get me wrong, we were entertained by those guys, but they weren't the type of people that you would have a WrestleMania 10 Brett versus Owen type match with.
Well, maybe not one of those types of matches, but I always thought that Waltman could have a lot of good matches with people.
Yeah, I mean, he was hit or miss. You
Sometimes.
know, it depended on the night, it depended on the drug, and it depended on who his opponent was and how much he gave a shit that night. And I mean, that's just the God's honest truth.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm not saying that, but for the most part, he was a big character at one point. Was X
Yeah,
Pac?
yeah, yeah.
But but it's funny because you know we kind of skip like his first part. Growing up and wrestling and stuff like that, and he really, if you think about it, and they pointed this out on the documentary, which was he was one of the unsung heroes of high flying. I mean,
Right,
he was doing a lot of the Hurricane Rana, jumping off someone's back or something like that, long before really anyone else was doing it.
right. Yeah, I mean that's a lot of what goes into it. Is like there's a difference between lucha and American high flying.
Right.
And he was kind of I would dare say, the mainstream innovator of the American high flying, at least in the world of or the realm of WWF.
Yeah.
If you were watching WCW, you had already been watching cruiserweights do this shit for a while, but a lot of that was lucha. But there were still some high flyers in there. But in the WWF world, he was really the innovator, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it showed that, especially with his days in Stampede Wrestling, where I guarantee you a lot of wrestlers were not doing that in Stampede Wrestling, being trained by Stu and stuff like that.
Right,
Not a lot of people were doing that. And Bret Hart has gone on record saying that he thought Owen was a better athlete and a better wrestler than even him, even for someone who calls himself, the best there is and stuff like that.
right,
But Owen was very instrumental in that. And and I've gone back and I've watched, a lot of his stuff since then. And I gotta say, the best feud that he was ever a part of was against his brother.
right. Because it was a great story.
Yeah,
That's an angle. I talk a lot about a wrestling angle, that it needs to be a simple story that people can understand, and that
yeah,
doesn't mean that you can't do innovative things with it. But when you start trying to throw all these convoluted things in there that most people can't relate to, then you've gone far off the deep end, and that relates to all forms of entertainment, not just pro
yeah,
wrestling, but pro wrestling especially. Like wrestling fans, I'm just going to put this eloquently. Wrestling fans are dumb, and they need simple stories, right? Nobody's watching this shit to solve a Sherlock Holmes mystery. You know what I'm saying? Like
yeah.
we want to see a simple storyline, and then the guys beat the shit out of each other. That's it.
Yeah, and it should be pretty simple, but even in today, I don't even think it's. I'm not going to agree with you that. I mean, some fans are dumb. I'll
Dumb
admit.
wasn't the word. I'll go with simple. How about that?
All right, yeah. That's better, I
It's
guess.
a
But
it is a simple form of entertainment. The
yeah,
the
it really.
complexity should be in the ring work, not the story.
Yeah, and I was just about to say, like I just think wrestling fans want simple storylines. Like, dude, this shouldn't be this hard for you to figure out. You can have entertaining stuff. You can push the boundaries at times, but the stuff has to make sense. Like a lot of the shit that I've seen, even in the Attitude Era, I'm just like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why is that happening? Why would anyone in real life do that? You know?
Right.
It's so scripted at times that it's like, what? And Owen and Brett were not from that world.
Right.
They grew up with Stu. So, they're like I said, they're birthed from the old school wrestling cloth. Now, they eventually learned how to somewhat adapt, which is why, Brett did so good with fighting against his brother, doing the stuff with him and Bulldog at Wembley Stadium, one of the best matches ever, and also his uh, In Your House 5 was amazing with Davy Boy and stuff like that. And then, you know, but Owen never really got like you said, when he moved into the Attitude Era, it was just like, dude, he looks so out of place. Like he looked like he should have been in WCW with his brother.
Right. Yeah, I agree entirely. And Jim Ross even said that within a few hours of him debuting, that he was better than anybody in the territories,
Yep.
which is insane. I mean, you think about that and the magnitude. I mean, this isn't like some fucking guy in the audience saying that. This is Jim fucking Ross. This is a guy that has probably a better grasp on wrestling talent
Yep.
than arguably anybody in the world, because he was the head of talent relations for the biggest wrestling company in the history of the universe during their peak, during
Yes.
their heyday. This man
Yes.
is responsible for signing Chris Jericho, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, Stone Cold. I mean, The Rock. Like, the
Mick Foley.
list goes on and on and on. I mean, it is literally just, you could basically pull up anybody who's in the Hall of Fame that came into wrestling around the time that he was the head of talent relations, and he fucking signed them.
Yeah, I mean, he's a genius. So for him to say that, that just goes to show you the time. Here's another guy, Jim Cornette, who hates high flying. I mean, let's be honest, he hates high flying wrestling. He really does. Like especially in today's world, he loved Owen Hart.
Well, see, that's the thing though, is I don't think that Jim Cornette hates high flying. I think Jim Cornette hates shit that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
even though Owen would do the high flying type stuff, he never really made it look like it never looked like him and his opponent went out there and did some acrobatics together.
yeah,
He was
absolutely.
he was doing shit to piss them off. The other guy might be a serious straight laced wrestler. Owen Hart does some shit and does a backflip off the guy's back. Okay, now he's turbo pissed. It was that sort of thing. Um,
Yeah,
and that's the difference between you know Owen Hart and I don't want to name anybody specifically. So just turn on fucking Dynamite and pick someone. Anyway, and Cornette actually managed Owen Hart for a short period of time.
oh
Um,
yeah,
and you
some
can tell that Jim Cornette has talked about a lot of things in pro wrestling over the years, and I've never heard him be unable to speak about it. And in this episode,
yeah,
even Cornette just can't talk about it because of how tragic it is.
yeah.
So,
Because and as we'll get into it, it was so unnecessary.
right. And I mean, we talk about the storyline with Brett, and everyone understands the whole idea of you're in the shadow of someone who is more successful than you, and you feel that you are more talented than them. I think a lot of people can relate to that in some way, whether it's a brother or a co-worker or a friend or like another person on the sports team or whatever aspect of life. Envy is something that a lot of people have felt at one point or another. That's why this storyline works. He's the younger brother. He feels like he's the best out of everyone, and the older brother, he's constantly been in the shadow of him. He goes down the street and he introduces himself as Owen Hart, and somebody says, "Oh, are you Bret Hart's little brother?" It's that kind of thing,
Yeah.
and that's why that works. And then, of course, they have this show stealer match, and this match at WrestleMania 10 came pretty close to being on my top 5 list. It's such a good match, and I would encourage anybody to go watch it. Um, I had never seen any of his work until after he died because I was a WCW guy. So I really had to experience all of his body of work, well after he had passed, unfortunately.
Yeah, I had seen a lot of his work because I had seen because I watched both. I followed Nitro more, but I watched both because Dad watched both of them. So that's kind of how I get my wrestling fandom is what's from my dad because he watched both of them. So, I would see Owen Hart occasionally, but nothing ever really stood out to me about him. Some stuff in the Attitude Era did, but not a lot. And then, like, I said years later, I see the WrestleMania match with him and Bret Hart, amazing matchup. I saw the cage match between the two at SummerSlam. I don't care what anyone says. That cage match is amazing, kind of thing.
It
Like,
is.
I love that match, and then some other stuff, but I think also Owen Hart is known for something else, which is not necessarily very good. But he was known, I do remember that he broke Austin's neck, kind
Correct.
of, and that apparently wasn't handled well by him, and I think Steve and him had a little bit of an issue after that, obviously, which is understandable in ways.
Right. And I mean, I understand, if they still had beef when he died, I mean, I can only imagine, Austin has to kind of carry that with him. And that's unfortunate. Um, this episode is narrated by Jericho, and he's also a speaker on the episode.
Yeah,
And Jericho lists Owen as kind of his main influence for getting into wrestling
yeah,
because they show where he was drawing pictures of him and Owen as the tag champions and stuff like that of when he was a child. And so you can definitely look at Jericho's body of work and tell that it was influenced by Owen Hart heavily.
yeah. And if people are wondering, like why is he such a big Owen fan, and so was dare I say it, Benoit. Benoit on his original DVD talked about, how much he loved Owen and how much, his death affected him and stuff like that. Not near to the point of Eddie and everything like that, but, it affected him. And, it was because these guys grew up in the Stampede wrestling, like they grew up in Canada and stuff like that. So they would go to, see Stampede wrestling all the time. And that's how they got familiar with Bret Hart and Owen Hart and, the whole Hart dynasty and whatnot.
Right. And Jericho is a narrator here, but our sort of main point of view in this episode is none other than Martha Hart, Owen's wife.
Yep.
And they started dating at 15, and he died at 34. So
Yeah.
they were together around 19 years, uh, which is a long time. They had 2 children together. We see them in the episode as well. And, you know,
Yeah.
the thing that really struck me when I watched this episode for the first time, and it's the second time as well, but the first time I watched it was just how strong she is as a person. She just comes across as this like person who has gone on this crusade against this mega, multi-million dollar, even multi-billion dollar company. Um, and won and was seeking justice for her fallen husband and really, to this day is still fighting that battle because Owen is not in the Hall of Fame, and we'll talk a bit more about that, I think, towards the end. Um, and they have the foundation that they made for him, where in his name and using a lot of the money that they got from the settlement, they are helping house the homeless and like feed people that need it and stuff like that, and doing all these really cool things. His son OG is a human rights lawyer. They're doing all these things that Owen cared about and that were important to him other than wrestling. And so I just think that that's just really commendable. She came
Yeah.
across to me as just such a brave, like inspiring person when I watched this.
And I think that becomes, from the influence of Owen and stuff like that. Owen was like that. Name me one wrestler in the business that will say one bad thing about Owen. Name me one. Austin won't even say one about him.
Well, you kind of can't now, but no
Well,
one did.
I mean,
But no one did before either, right?
yeah, that's what I meant. They would talk about how much of life he was, behind the scenes. He was Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett apparently was really close to him and stuff like that, and they were ribbers.
Yeah.
Like the definition of ribbing is Owen Hart.
Well, he broke kayfabe in the promo that night.
Yep.
During Over the Edge, he basically just couldn't continue with what was supposed to happen. And I mean, we'll get into this too, but
Yeah.
that event should not have continued. But we will get more into that. So I want to talk about the circumstances of this night in Kansas City.
Yes.
Um, so
Ugh.
we've got Over the Edge 99, which they've since retired the name of that pay-per-view, thankfully. Um, this was May 23rd, 99. It was at the Kemper Arena in Kansas City, Missouri. Now, Martha recounts in the episode that they had brought in some of the most famous riggers from like Hollywood productions. People had done stuff with Disney and Industrial Light and Magic and stuff like that in the past when he had done this entrance. But on this particular night, they sort of rode in, and this was one of the things that was brought to light in this episode that previously no one knew, was that there was a different production company, different rigging company rather, than they usually had. A cheaper rigging company that didn't have experience doing this type of entrance or this type of stunt. Um, and they were not using the proper equipment. And they kind of wrote this in at the last minute. It was basically he had just gotten home from the road, and they said, "Well, we have to fit him for this vest because we just wrote this in last minute, so we've got to get him to come back out here so we could fit this apparatus to him or whatnot." Um, and this was, like I said, one of the things that this episode revealed, and I think this is really the key detail that switches
Yeah.
it from was there negligence to there definitely was negligence because they were trying to cut corners. And what was this entrance really going to do? It was not the main event. It was not like The Rock was going to come out, you know, uh, you know, uh, hanging from the ceiling, or Shawn Michaels was going to do some grand entrance for WrestleMania or something like that. This was a sort of a mid card gag that they were doing to pick on Sting.
Because that's how Vince Russo wrote.
That's true. That's very true. And Vince McMahon, would have made the ultimate call on this. And
Yeah.
somebody calling an audible on a pay per view a few days before. That's got. I mean, Vince McMahon signs off on that.
Yeah, I agree. It's poor planning. You don't, you do not do. I do not care what it is. You do not do last minute planning when it comes to that far up. when it comes to a stunt like that. Like it just you don't do it, and it was terrible timing on their part. And I'm not saying coincidence timing or anything. I'm talking like just bad overall. Like it was an awful idea. And like you said, it's not even the main event. And here's my thing: if it was a gag on Sting, then I don't ever want to hear again on a WWE documentary that Vince McMahon only cares about his business. No, fuck you. He literally wanted to kill everything in wrestling so that he can control it all, which is stupid in the first place. But, that's a completely different story. But if that is all to do, just a gag on Sting because Sting was the hottest thing in pro wrestling, it that's just mind-boggling to me. Like, you're literally writing television like that?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and this was somebody's life that was in the balance here, you know,
Yeah,
and the fact that they cut corners on the rigging company, I'm sure they said, "Oh, it'll be fine. We do dangerous shit here all the time." This is not hitting somebody over the head with a steel chair, which, as we came to learn later, that did put a bunch of people's lives in danger anyway.
yeah,
But this, not only the way that it happened, but then the way that it was handled. So they're getting ready for the match. He was supposed to face Godfather,
yeah,
and Godfather's in Gorilla in the back, and they're going to do this stunt. Owen falls, and at least they pan the camera away, and it didn't actually end up being on the event. Um, they pan the camera, they're panning the crowd. Uh, nobody really knows what's going on,
yeah,
and it's just the way that they handled this. Jim Ross is sitting there, and I feel so bad for him watching this because he's literally sitting there on TV, and he's trying to fill time, and he has no idea at all, like what to say, what's happening.
yeah.
Everything just goes completely fucking haywire.
Yeah, you could tell, and here's why there's no footage of it. Because if you noticed, what happened it was, they showed the graphics up on the screen. Godfather versus Owen Hart next, kind of thing. So they're getting ready to lower Owen. It's not like he was just going to come down like right away and stuff like that. He was going to come up while they were on camera and stuff like that. So when he goes to, uh, start to lower, not even really start to lower, but just hang there to get ready to lower, that was when the cable broke.
Yeah.
And it showed that and everything like that. And I will not blame JR or King for just being out there and doing their job. You
No,
can't blame
absolutely not.
anyone for doing their job that night,
They
because that
were
was what we're told to do.
they were in the worst scenario, I mean, that an announcer could be in,
And
because you have to fill time, and you've just watched somebody that you are close with die in front of you.
yeah,
And you've got to explain this away to a live TV audience. Um, the feed should have been cut immediately. They should have
yeah,
canceled this pay per view. This event should have ended. It should have been a crime scene. The police should have come in and investigated. Um, but they didn't. And Jerry Lawler left the desk to go and check on him. And Jerry Lawler comes into Gorilla, and he says to Godfather that he thinks he's dead. And they said, both Godfather and JR both said that that Lawler was like ghost white,
yeah,
um,
yeah. He was.
which anyone would be.
He was because he was the one that pointed it out to JR when they're just sitting there. They just threw the graphics up, and then he points up to JR because he sees Owen falling and stuff like that. And I think when I heard the way that this was described, um, the most heartbreaking one for me personally, I mean, the whole thing is, but was when the man who shows nothing but, anger and stuff like that, and shows kind of a crazy side, Jim Cornette, he broke down saying, because Owen screamed, "Get out of the way," because he knew it was over. There's nothing he could do, obviously. And he screamed down, get out of the way. And he had enough sense and he had enough good decency, I guess, is what Jim Cornette said, not me, but, that he, would do that for someone to, I guess, I don't
Well,
know.
yeah, because Jimmy Corderas could have been severely injured or killed if Owen had landed on him.
If Owen had landed on him, he would have killed him. He would have squashed him, basically. It probably would have like broken his neck or something like that. I don't know, man. It just right there is just when it's just like it made me want to turn off the episode. I'm just like, I can't, this is awful. This is it. It just is awful. And yes, I agree with you completely. The feed literally, like they shouldn't even tried to pan the crowd. They shouldn't even, maybe they were trying to fill time. Like I can understand trying to fill time just to be like, okay, we don't know what's going on. What the hell's going on? What just happened? And then when it's obvious, like, hey, he's dead, get out, go, get out, just go. We'll explain. I know that there's this whole cable contract. If there is a cable company out there at that time that would have been like, hey, why did you cancel that? Even though the guy died, like you still have a contract. Do you really think someone would be that heartless?
I
Well,
mean,
I don't know.
even
Maybe,
if maybe it is capitalist America, but even so, fuck that. Like
yeah,
this is a crime scene at this point in time. And the thing is, I guarantee you, as soon as it happened, Vince McMahon's thinking, fuck, we're gonna be liable for this. Because he knew that he had went with a shitty rigging company. He knew that they had, wrote it in at the last minute and that they had neglected to, hire somebody that was vetted, that was experienced. And he's thinking, if the police come in here and investigate this right now, they're going to find that out and we're going to be fucked. And that was what was running through his mind when he decided to continue the show. That to me is unforgivable. I don't give a shit what you think the man's done for pro wrestling. Fuck
yeah,
that. 100% fuck that. And the way that it was handled after the fact with Kevin Dunn giving Jr. Hey, Owen's dead. You're going back on air in 10. So Jim Ross has 10 seconds to come back on the air after a 15-minute hiatus where they decided, hey, we're going to continue this show. Jim Ross has 10 seconds to come back on the air and tell the American people that or well, the fans in general, I'm assuming they were broadcasting this to multiple countries at this point in time, that Owen Hart has died in a tragic accident right there in the arena and that they're going to continue the event. I can't fathom how the wrestlers felt. This is somebody that you knew, that you went on the road with, that you admired and probably respected. And you're going to go out there and wrestle in a ring where you can feel the broken boards from where his body hit the ring and his blood is still on the mat.
yeah.
You have
Um,
got to be shitting me. I mean, I can't, I just can't fathom it. I really can't.
yeah. The whole thing just it doesn't make any sense in anything like that. And I mean, if you want to see the biggest example, it was Jeff Jarrett that night. You go and you watch Jeff Jarrett. He broke character, like you said. And Deborah, oh hey, we've got to move your match up because your best friend just died, just fell, and they knew he was dead. Everybody knew he was dead when he fell. There was no question. There wasn't a, oh well, I hope he can make it through. No, he was dead. He was dead on contact. You're not gonna fall from that high type of height and land on something and be okay. It's not going to happen. And they knew he was, dead. And I just, hearing that, like you can see the broken board that bent, when he hit and everything. And then, like you said, the blood on the canvas. I'm just like, oh my God, like I didn't realize how bad this was. And the fact that it's still on the network.
Right.
The the whole event is still on the fucking network to this day.
And what's even more mad, I mean, this to put it into comparison, right? This is like you're driving, like you're a semi truck driver. You're killed in a brutal accident, and the semi truck company brings you out there as like brings another driver out, and is like, yeah, there's still some blood on the seat, and has you get up in the cab and take the thing back, to wherever it's going, with there still being blood on the seat. That's the equivalent that we're talking about here. It is absolutely maddening. It is quite possibly, no, not quite possibly. It is definitely the worst thing that WWE and Vince McMahon are guilty of. And
Yeah.
it really changed my outlook on the whole thing because being a ruthless businessman is one thing. I admire and even respect that. But when you put somebody's life at stake over, I don't know what the difference would have been. If it was a couple $100, I don't care if it was 10,000, I don't care if it's $25,000. You don't put a father and a husband's life at stake all because you want to cut a couple of corners, write something in at the last second. It was needless, you know. And the thing is, after this, thankfully, Martha goes on an investigation. She took the kids there to the arena. They walked on that very catwalk that he fell from.
When I heard that, because I didn't know that she did that. And when I heard that, I went, oh my God, I cannot imagine the emotion, probably the scariness, they probably had every emotion running through their body while trying to walk on a catwalk up on top of an arena and everything like that. Like it just, oh, and that was the one that broke me on this episode was the family.
Yeah,
You know, because WWE can say that they suffered. All the wrestlers can say that and the wrestlers, again, I'm not blaming any of the wrestlers that continue to work or do work for WWE. I'm not blaming them whatsoever and whatnot. But it just the ones that hurt the most was his family.
agreed. And Martha Hart wanted, they sued him and won, but Martha wanted it to go to trial. She didn't care about the money, and they got $18 million.
Yeah.
So with that money, they can do the foundation. They were able to put his kids through school, and she's never going to have to work again if she didn't want to. Um, but that's not what it was about. She promised Owen a day of reckoning. She wanted this to come out publicly in court. She wanted everybody to know what happened. She wanted everybody to know why her husband was dead. And because it was in a settlement and didn't go to court, most of the world found out the intricate details during this episode of Dark Side of the Ring.
Yeah, they found out like we really found out why she doesn't want Owen Hart in the WWE Hall of Fame. She doesn't want them mentioning his name at times. I mean, they're going to with their flashbacks and stuff like that because that's just going to happen. There's a bunch of footage, and Owen should be remembered for those things. Don't get me wrong. Owen should definitely be remembered for his work and stuff like that. But to honor him, that I can see how that's just a slap in the face to her. That's not even a slap. That's just a gun to the head kind of thing. Like
And
it's
And Owen will not be. I don't think Owen. I used to think he should be in the Hall of Fame until I watched this episode. But here's the
yeah.
thing: if his wife doesn't want him in there, if his son doesn't want him in there, and his daughter doesn't say specifically in the episode that she doesn't want him in there, but his daughter seems like she hates pro wrestling as a whole.
Oh
So
yeah.
so I can't imagine that she would. As long as his family doesn't want him in there, he won't be in there. And I don't see the next generation wanting him in there either. So if he does go in there, it's going to be a very, very long time, probably well after Vince McMahon is dead. Um, and I think that we should honor his family's wishes. I think that to an extent they kind of have to. I don't know the details surrounding that, but it's like if they're gonna put him in the Hall of Fame, then his family has to come there and accept the award. Someone has to accept the award on his behalf. Brett's not gonna fucking do it. Um, and the thing to me that really, I mean, all this shit is ludicrous, right? But the fact that some of the members of the Hart family were like, "Hey, the whole family relies on wrestling. You can't sue the biggest guy in, in pro wrestling uh, over the death of your husband and our family member." That was insane to me, especially because it's like, well, what is it going to take? I mean, how bad are they going to have to shit on your family? Because we already had the Montreal screw job. They felt guilty about that, and they wanted to keep a member of the Hart Foundation, so to keep those fans around. So they gave Owen a better contract, and they kept him around. Then they negligently put him in harm's way, and he died. I mean, how much more shit were they going to have to do to the Hart family before the members of the Hart family all supported her lawsuit? I mean, some of them even destroyed evidence.
Yeah, and that was going to be my, question to you. Like, it's like, why was Bret Hart so keen on, coming back to WWE, forgiving them for the Montreal screw job? And I'm sitting there when I'm watching this episode, I'm like, you forgave. Think about this. All right. This is why I kind of have a low opinion of Bret Hart at times. Think about this. He forgave them for a wrestling storyline, but he's not, but he, uh, you know, I guess, but he's not going to mention the fact that they basically killed his brother.
Yeah, I mean,
Think about that.
it is interesting. It's very interesting to think about why he would have come back and why he would have forgiven them. Maybe because of Natalia. I don't know. Um, Maybe he needed the money. He had a lot of medical issues after his accident with Goldberg, where he had the stroke and everything.
Yeah,
Maybe if that's what it was for, then you got to put food in your mouth. But it is
I,
it would be hard for me.
yeah, and I can agree with that because again, my next question is, like we have, this story about Owen Hart and everything like that, and we're getting really angry at WWE, and I agree with that. But can you blame or condemn talent that still continues to work there, that wants to work there, and everything like that?
No, I don't. I don't.
Yeah,
I don't blame anybody working there now. I don't. I mean, that would be. I think that would be irresponsible of me. Because it's a lot of people's dream to go and work for the WWE. And Vince McMahon making a decision 21 years ago, I mean, that should not stop anybody from going because it's not like somebody's going to go work there. It's not like they're all going to walk out and the company's going to go under.
yeah.
That's not going to happen.
But but just looking back at the situation, just hearing the stories, which Martha showing the clip, she actually has the fucking clip in her storage
Yeah.
and says this is what killed my husband, basically. And I was just like, I like I remember I just saw this. And at the time, I was, I was, I guess, going back to some Attitude Era things. I was watching a lot of Austin versus McMahon because I still think that that's one of the greatest things ever in pro wrestling, and it just is.
It
But
is.
um, you know, I couldn't do it. I couldn't watch wrestling after this. I couldn't do it. Like it was just, oh my god, like and here was the thing too. What makes this all so interesting as well? Owen said goodbye to his kids like he was saying goodbye forever before he left for uh Kansas City that night.
Right.
Remember? Like his son even said that he kind of said like he was like, "Huh, that was interesting." Like it was a little bit more forceful and everything like that or what, I don't know if that's the right word, but it just, it felt different to him. And you could tell, and they even said this that or many said this that like he did not feel comfortable going up there.
Right.
And we've often heard one thing too, a lot in WWE, is that Vince McMahon doesn't ask his talent to do anything that he wouldn't do. He had Shawn Michaels, do that grand entrance. Shawn Michaels didn't necessarily feel comfortable with it. So Vince did it before him, and then he did it and stuff like that. And it was one of the greatest entrances of all time and everything like that. Um, but I don't remember anyone asking Owen if he felt comfortable doing it.
Yeah, and Vince McMahon certainly didn't trial run this exact setup because he would be dead,
Yeah.
and then we wouldn't be having to review this episode because it wouldn't fucking exist. We would do it would be the tragic time Vince McMahon fell from the ceiling episode. Um,
Yeah.
that being said, one last thing I want to talk about in on the fuck Vince column is the I resent your tone at the press conference. They're just these people are just trying to get answers for what looks like, a I mean, what was a death on the clock
Yeah.
that was avoidable. And Vince's attitude there is just unacceptable to me. And the whole way that this was handled, I mean, they know they fucked it up. If they hadn't, they wouldn't have lost the lawsuit. If they
Yeah.
had done everything in their power to protect Owen Hart's life, as they should have as his employer, there wouldn't have been an $18 million lawsuit.
Yeah. It just, I, I don't know what to say. Um, it
I
just,
personally think we've said all there is to say.
yeah. It just, the whole point really that I got out of this episode, not even all of the lawsuits, not even all of the, possible criminal stuff and everything like that, but it just says this whole fucking thing was unnecessary. This should not have happened. There should not even be a discussion of this. No one
Right.
should have wrote that at the last minute. They should not have jerry-rigged the fucking thing. It shouldn't have happened. It was avoidable from start to finish. You could have not wrote something like that in there. Owen could have just done the running out thing like he was the Blue Blazer, which would have been even funnier, to be quite honest. If you're looking for entertainment, him running out as the Blue Blazer, I'm just like, that would have been funny as hell. And if he had like attacked Godfather from behind or something like that, cool. Do something fucking simple like that. But don't write something like that, into the thing just because you're trying to gag on another superstar from another company. That's just fucking ridiculous to me. And it's just and like I said, I I I understand, you not wanting to give WWE any money and everything like that. But again, I don't blame talent that did that finished out the show that night, that you know that still work there, that have worked there and everything like that. Like you can't blame them and everything like that. There's 2 guys to blame. Vince Russo, actually, both of their names are Vince.
Yeah. I mean, and I would go so far as to throw Kevin Dunn in there as well because the way that he handled this was also terrible. I don't know if he was directly involved in the rigging and whatnot as far as them going with the shittier rigging company, but he definitely was in on the call to continue the show because he was the producer that night. And he was also the one that told JR to go back on TV with 10 seconds to spare to announce that Owen Hart died. So,
What I don't, let's take this as a scenario. If you if say something like that happened, at VPW, that will never happen and everything like that. But like, just say hypothetically, like if you told me, through my headset, hey, that guy just died. You've got 10 minutes. I would just be like, I'm not saying a damn word. I'm
right.
I'm leaving. You
Yeah,
know, and again, I don't blame JR. He was in a tough position. You could tell in the documentary he didn't know what to do. What do you do?
right.
You know, when the guy that and you can blame Kevin Dunn and Vince Russo as well. You can throw his name in the hat. You can just throw all of that. There's one, but we've all known this about WWE. What is the one thing everyone says about WWE?
Vince
There's
has his
one
finger
guy.
in everything. Vince is over everything, every detail from top to bottom. And he's
Yep.
ultimately the one to blame for this.
Yep. That's it. One guy.
And I think folks we're going to leave you with that. There's a reason we have avoided doing this episode for so long is because it's possibly the most terrible episode of Dark Side of the Ring. And that's a high bar. And you know,
But we got through it.
yeah.
I got through it somehow. I don't know how I did that, because just even hearing the story about it again, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, and it's not so much I didn't want to. I mean, I didn't want to come on here and talk about it for an hour. But the other thing is, I really didn't want to have to watch that episode again,
Yeah.
and it made me just as furious as I was the first time I saw it. When you watch the Benoit episode, you're shocked, or episodes rather, you're shocked, you're confused, you're hurt. But with this one, it was almost completely anger for me because this was so avoidable. Um, and this was, this was just such a just awful thing to happen to such a great person that everyone seemed to love and that he did not want to spend the rest of his life in the pro wrestling business. He wanted to spend it with his family. And they're not ever going to get that now.
No.
And and there's no amount of there's nothing that's ever going to change that, and that's why I think it's unforgivable. Uh, that being said, I'm glad that we are at the end of this, and we can wrap it up. We can put a nice bow on season 2 of Dark Side of the Ring, um, and we can move on. And that's exactly what we're going to do. The next episode that comes out, we're going to start our coverage. The format's going to be a little different, but we're going to start our coverage of Ring of Honor's 2020 tournament where they bring back the Pure Championship. So I'm very interested in that because I have not watched Ring of Honor seriously in a very long time. So a lot of this is going to be very new to me and a kind of a new experience for me, and I'm going to get exposed to some talent that I haven't either haven't seen since they were on the Indies or that I haven't seen at all. So I am excited about that, and that's going to kind of be the format of the show for a while until we get through it. So it's a big tournament.
Yeah, dude. Like I said, this was an idea I threw at you because I've been preaching it for so long that I've said, look, I believed in Ring of Honor. I think they have a great product, and I think people just need to see it. Like you just need to sit down and watch it. So I'm glad that we're doing this. I'm so looking forward to it. I can't wait to cover this and something positive.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad that, but I am glad that we've done this Dark Side of the Ring, but that we're kind of through with it, and we put a bow on it until season 3 starts.
Right. And yeah, I mean, new things are happening in wrestling every day for them to add to season 3, 4, 5, whatever. We know season 3 is going to be an expanded season. So, that
Yeah,
being said, thanks for joining me for this, Caleb.
yeah,
One of the hardest episodes we've had to do.
absolutely.
And this has been an Evolved Review.